Hi, and in our last video, I covered how to crosshatch, hatch, and blend several different shapes. Next, I'm going to show you how to do scumbling on a sphere. And scumbling and blending are probably my two favorite methods of shading. Scumbling is really great if you want something to look more textured, more chaotic, or energetic. I went ahead and drew my light source and the light coming down on my object. I'm going to draw a little ellipse from where the sunlight is reaching past my sphere. Okay. And remember, when you go to shade this, cast shadow, you want it to be darker around the bottom of the sphere and then kind of lighten out where the light is furthest away from the object. So this area is still going to be pretty dark, but this area is going to lighten up quite a bit. Something to remember with spheres is that you want to include something called a core shadow. You do have a basic shadow all over your sphere, and then something called the core shadow reaches from one of the lines from the light source to the other. And this side's going to be skinnier because you're receiving more of the light, and where it reaches furthest, you get less light, so you're going to have a bigger area for your core shadow. I'm just going to go ahead and keep those lines there. Normally I wouldn't if I were sketching, but I'm leaving that there so you guys can see it. One thing to remember with your circles, you want them to reach around the edges. So like in the corners here, they would reach up and this side would reach down. And you want to include this so that your object looks a bit more rounded. I'm going to make this a little bit more intense. I'm going to erase this so it doesn't affect my drawing too much. But again, I'm going to pretty much leave these here so that you guys can see what I'm talking about more. With the sphere and scumbling, I'm going to start off with scumbling. Something to note is that the harder and closer together your lines are, the darker and more filled in it's going to look. With lighter areas, you want to go lighter pressure, more space in between the lines. And then when you want it to blend, you're going to layer your lines and kind of adjust how wide or how close together you want those lines. Otherwise, it's not terribly scientific, not like this guy here. It's a little bit out of control, which is something I like. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my lightest lines first. Imagine that your highlight shadow is kind of here. Again, I'm going to leave that there so you guys know where I'm going with it. I'm going to fill in just my base shadow, kind of that medium shadow that you'll see around the sphere. I'm using light, loose lines so it doesn't look too filled in. This edge here is closer to the light, so it's going to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to add just a little layer to this portion of the main shadow. All right, and then I'm going to pay now close attention to my core shadow. I'm going to start in the middle of my core shadow. I'm going now with a harder pressure, and my lines are going to be closer together. I don't go all the way to the edge that I drew because I want to be able to kind of blend it. And so if I start with my darkest area first, it's kind of a gauge in between the light and the dark areas. Okay, pretty happy with that. I'm now going to do a layer of scumbling to help it blend up into the sphere, the stratosphere. Of course, I've gone a little bit more loose with my scumbling. What you can do is choose to do like smaller circles or, smaller scribbles, bigger scribbles. It all kind of depends on what look you're going for. Now, remember our reflected light that I've mentioned, maybe a few times or so. If you decide, oh man, I accidentally made this area a little too dark and I need that light reflecting off the table back onto the bottom of this, I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and press into that outer edge. Usually that reflected light hits right about where the shadow starts. It's a good gauge of where to put that. So if you just kind of press this gently into your paper, it's going to lift some of that graphite off, which is why it's kind of sticky. It's so that it can grab that graphite left behind and lift it off the paper for you. I really like these for kind of lifting charcoal off paper too, if you ever work with charcoal. All right, now let's do that drop shadow or that cast shadow. I'm actually going to outline this on the bottom so that I have more of a dramatic shift from sphere to shadow. And now I'm going to tightly start scumbling the shadow. Or scribbling. I mean, both terms are just fine. I use scumbling just so that you get more familiar with that term. Go lighter on the pressure. And I'm going to layer some more towards the base. And there you have it, a scumbled sphere.